Welcome to the Joyride podcast. I'm your host, Rebekah Joy, and I am so excited to be here. I am sitting in my office right now. It's a Friday night. It's June 30th. It's like 8:30, and I am just getting the most beautiful, image of the moon right in front of me. It just is a moment. It's a moment, and I'm so, like I said, incredibly excited to be here. This podcast has been in the works in my mind for quite some time, and I'm gonna get into the whole story as to how it came about, why I'm doing this. And you're probably listening to this if you've never seen me or heard me and you're like, who is this bitch? So in this first podcast episode, I'm just going to be sharing a little bit as to who I am, what I'm doing here on the mic, what you can expect from this podcast. So let's get into it. This is the Joyride, baby. We are gonna go fucking deep. We're gonna go deep on this podcast. I know you're sitting here listening to this and you're like, this is just gonna be another podcast. No, it's not gonna be another podcast because one, it's me. And my first little nugget of wisdom for anyone listening to this is if you are sitting here, right now, feeling trapped, feeling caged in, feeling like, well, I can't go do what I want to do because there are already so many people out there doing it. Girl or boy, that is just fear trying to take you over. And I actually was reading Big Magic today for the first time, and it just immediately sucked me in. And the language in the book is just so good. And a line that really stuck out to me today is that fear and creativity coexist. You really can't have one or the other if you are being innovative, if you are going after your dreams, if you are truly paving your own path. There is always going to be some fear. And I liked how this author in the book talked about if you are sitting here just wanting to be absolutely fearless, she was like, you're either like a psychopath or that's just like not the right way to go about things. There's something so beautiful that I have found throughout my journey, which I will get into in this episode, of really learning to love, like really truly loving the art of uncertainty, the art of, I don't know how this is going to happen. I don't know how this is going to work out, but I know and I feel very, very strongly inside that I need to do this, that I need to go for this. And having that feeling in itself is enough. So that's just what I wanted to start off with in this episode. This is going to be a shorter episode, but I just really want you guys to get to know me, to get to know this space. I don't want to sit here and say X, Y, and Z. This is exactly what you can expect from this podcast, to be honest. The way that I move about my life is in a very open, non-specific type of manner. What I will say is, like I mentioned before, this space is going to be a very open, honest space for me to really create the space for not only myself to share my truth, my authenticity, my voice, but for me to open up the space for anyone that I have a conversation with on this podcast, whether that be someone that is really important to me in my life, a dear friend, a family member, someone part of my healing team, someone that I've met recently who I'm just incredibly fascinated by. I'm going to be cultivating this space to be sharing conversation, creating intimate connections and deep bonds with people for all of you listening to be in this space with us and it's going to be deep, honest, raw, and blunt, and we're just going to talk about all the things of life. So I know that sounds very, very broad, but I don't like to put myself in a box. That's just not who I am. But you can expect for us to be talking about spiritual things, mystical things, emotions, intuition, just all of our different paths in life and how we really learn to master and deal with those crazy, crazy highs and devastating lows of life. So that is what the overall theme message is of this podcast. Now a little bit about me. Who am I? Who is Rebekah Joy? That's another thing that I've learned about myself. I don't like to identify myself as just one thing because, girl, I am 87 million different things. Today, right here, right now, I'm a speaker and I'm sharing on the mic. But you know what? Sometimes I'm the bad bitch in the club. Sometimes I'm the granola girl. Sometimes I'm the Pilates girly. Sometimes I'm up in the gym. Sometimes I'm just sitting in nature and soaking it all in. I'm so many different things. But something that I have known about myself forever, it just was this deep inner knowing, was that I needed to create this space for myself just to share my authentic truth. If you've followed me for a while, I have been talking and sharing on my Instagram stories for, I want to say, well over 5 years. I think I really started sharing my inner world with the internet after I graduated college. I'm 27 now, so that was, back in 2017. Damn, it's been a long time. I'm old. But it's been a journey, you guys. It's been a journey to get to where I am now, to feel so beautifully rooted in who I am and what I am creating. And I know that right here, right now, in this present moment, I'm smiling super big as I say this, I am on the soul path. And it's interesting because a part of me believes that we're all always on our soul path, but then not really at the same time, because like I mentioned, I'm 27 years old. This year I launched my coaching business. I'm a human design coach, which is something that I just discovered maybe about 2 years ago. But I remember sitting in my college, it wasn't a dorm room, sitting in my room in my sorority house my junior year of college and listening to, I think it was called maybe the Life Coach School, listening to an episode of this podcast and me thinking to myself, like, I'm going to be a coach. Like, I just knew it. I just had this really, really strong inner knowing. And then I immediately shut it down. I thought to myself, okay, you want to be a life coach? Like, what do you even need to do for that? Do you need to go to life coach school? Like, do you need to get a license? Like, people are going to pay me to listen and take my advice? What the heck? So I knew at a very, very young age, in my eyes, when you're in college, like, you're still young. There's so much stimulus happening around you. You don't know who the heck you are. I definitely thought I did at the time. I thought I knew who I was. I knew my plan. I knew my path. And then I graduated college and I just tried so many different things. And I started to embark on this incredibly expansive, mind-blowing, mystical experience of learning who I was, what my soul wanted to tell me, like what that inner voice was, who is she? And that voice just over time got louder and louder and louder. So over the span of my 20s, which I'm still in, I had a reading with a now friend, but an astrologist the other weekend, and he told me that I'm just at the beginning of my solar return. And when I had this reading a few weeks ago, I felt this ping inside me of like, yeah, like I really feel it in this moment. I've done so much inner work over the past 5, 6, 7 years, and that work will continue to still come at hand, because once you start on this journey, it does not stop. You just get deeper. It's kind of like peeling back layers of an onion. You just start to discover like truly the juiciness, the yumminess of like who you are as a person. But I really felt like a few weeks ago, like I'm here at this point in my path where every single thing that I'm pursuing is so connected to who I am and what my soul wants to put forward and birth basically into our physical reality. And it's a really, really cool fucking feeling. And throughout this journey of birthing this podcast, this is a journey that I want to be on with you. I want you to have these incredibly eye-opening revelations and get to come back home to yourself amidst these conversations. So a little bit more about my journey. As I mentioned before, I've always known that I was a very, very intuitive guide, that I was meant to be a speaker. I would have these like really specific visions of myself standing up on stages and giving speeches to people. And I don't know, I had no idea what I would be speaking about. I just had these visions, and I just knew from that moment that I had back in college that I was meant to be a coach for other people. So throughout the span of my 20s, I have tried and I've done a million different things. Like I was working at a startup for a few years, and at one point I thought that was my identity, that I was going to go that route. I was working in retail. I was working at a med spa. I became a personal trainer. Like I had so many passions, and I never held back from pursuing every single one of my passions. I didn't know that at the time, each passion that I would invest all of my time and energy in wouldn't last. Because when I was in it, I thought, okay, this is it. And then a point would come in time, sometimes quicker than other. I remember I took this job, and within like a day, I knew I am not supposed to be here. I've had other jobs that I've lasted 6 months, which for me in my world is a long ass time. But what I didn't know at the time was that each job, each passion that I would pursue, it was not really about the passion, because I had this underlying energy of sharing this innate wisdom and inner knowing with people, and that is what would carry me from one goal, one manifestation, whatever the heck you want to call it, to the next thing. So here we are, 27. I'm living in Austin, Texas. Let me shed a little bit of light about that. Austin, Texas. So born and raised in Fremont, California. If you don't know where that is, the Bay Area. Let's just say San Francisco. Born and raised there, went to school at the University of Arizona, which those 4 years were just interesting. I felt very, how do I say this? I felt very alone in a sense. The entire process of being at that school was so like really unaligned with who I was. I mean, there were points in time where I loved the sorority life, and yes, I went out more, but as I got older, I realized, the people here and what they spend their time and energy on is just not for me. Granted, I met the most incredible girls who are my best friends, who I'm still very much so in contact with, and who are a huge, part of me and part of my life. But those 4 years taught me a lot about myself. So anyways, went to the University of Arizona, came back home, was living at home for a few years. And back in 2019, Austin was becoming really, really hot. I had never been, I think I'd only been to Texas maybe once in my life when I was super young for like my cousin's bat mitzvah or something. Didn't remember anything about Texas. Anyways, a bunch of my friends had come to visit, and they had told me, Rebekah, I think you would love it, because obviously they knew who I was and what I was looking for. And coming back home, it's interesting because back in the day when I was a personal trainer, I would always tell my clients, you just don't know how good you can feel and how connected you can be to yourself because you haven't experienced that yet. And it's something that has really stuck with me, and I think about that through every new step that I take, every new part of my journey, that just because I haven't lived something yet doesn't mean that it can't be far greater than I could ever imagine, because I just haven't done it yet. So living back at home, in suburbia, there was this huge part of me that I didn't even know was there, that I wasn't even aware of, because there was no opportunity for it to come out. So anyways, I had this very strong pull to Austin. I had booked a trip with a few friends to come out in Austin of May in 2019. I had come out a few days earlier because I had booked a ton of job interviews, which is interesting. Through each job interview, I knew that they weren't for me, but I ended up choosing one. Anyways, I remember being on South Congress. I think it was a Wednesday night, like I said, in April. So it was prime springtime. And I remember standing across the street from Perla's. If you know what Perla's is in Austin, it's got this beautiful big oak tree, and it's just the vibe, all the good vibes. And I remember standing across the street looking at this big, beautiful tree and seeing this girl walk across the street with her yoga mat. And I just felt the energy. I felt so connected, and I knew within minutes I have to be here. So long story short, I moved the next month, and I've been here for 4 months. In June, so this month, it's June 30th, I hit sorry, did I say 4 months? I've been here for 4 years. 4 months is very different than 4 years. I've been here for 4 years, and I learned through this session with my new astrologist, because he also does astrocartography, that I have a line near Austin. I can't remember. I think he said maybe it was my Midhaven line, but I have a line near Austin, and basically he was like, your soul wanted to come alive in Austin. And I'm like, that is exactly how I feel. This has been such an up and down journey throughout these past 4 years, where I won't get into all of it in this episode, but I truly, truly feel like my soul has come alive here, and I am so connected to myself here and to the people and what I enjoy and my interests and how I spend my time and my energy. And it's interesting because now, being so incredibly connected and in tune with myself, anytime I go on a trip, it doesn't matter where, I'm get me back home to Austin. I mean, I'm very, very present in the experience, and I really, really enjoy being outside of Austin because it makes me appreciate this place that I just love and adore so much, and that I call home so much more. So that's a little bit of a background of my age, kind of the backstory, where I live, and all that good stuff. Now let's get into me birthing this podcast. So let me ask you this. Have you ever felt inside you were meant to do something, but you didn't know when it was going to come about, but you just knew that something was going to happen? Like I mentioned before, I've felt that way about pretty much everything that I've ever done in my life, but especially with this podcast. I just knew that I had to have a podcast. So I started up a YouTube channel last year. I did it for about 6 months, which for me in my world, 6 months is a long time, but it taught me a lot, and I knew that I needed a platform to just share my truth, share my emotions, share my instincts, share these conversations that I have with the people in my world that are so incredibly gifted at what they do, and I knew that I needed a space for that to share. So I had launched my coaching business. So I'm a human design coach. Side note, I will be bringing up human design a lot in these conversations because it is a foundation of basically my brand and what I do. I found out about human design a little over 2 years ago, and it has completely transformed my world. And it is just such a pillar for me in my life. So you will be hearing, and I'll be talking a lot about human design and giving the background about it and sharing a lot of information about it because, yeah, I just, at this point in my life and being a coach and sharing and teaching about human design, it's like I can't not bring it up because it's such a huge part of who I am. So I launched my business on January 11th of this year. So 111, baby. I love me an angel number. And I kept on getting these hits, these pings throughout the past few months of like podcast. But I just felt internally that it wasn't the right time yet. And not all of my good friends, but a select few friends of mine who really can meet me at this energetic level would say to me, like, have you ever thought about doing a podcast? I'm like, oh yeah, like, I know that a podcast is in the cards for me. I just don't really feel like it's the right timing yet. And there's two things that I want to say about that. On one end, I knew that it wasn't the right time for me to have a podcast yet, but at the same time, this is literally what I teach in human design. I'm teaching you how to be in tune with your body. What happens through outside conditioning, through just the self-talk that we are continuously telling ourselves is our mind is always trying to get involved. So on one hand, like I said, I had felt that it wasn't the right time to launch this podcast, but at the same time, my mind was trying to get involved and tell me, well, you need to have X number of clients. You need to hit, these accolades in your business. You need to have reached this amount of money before you can put all of your time and energy into launching something new. I am a manifesting generator. Manifesting generators are the jack of all trades, baby. I love my energy. I love my energy type, and I so align with it because when I found out about human design and I learned that, why I had 57 million passions throughout my entire life, and I felt the deep desire and need to exercise and pursue every single one was just a part of who I am. I am someone who hits mastery so much faster and quicker than the next person, so it just makes sense that I do a lot of pivoting in my life. With that being said, I'm also someone who likes to have my hands in a lot of different projects. I used to think, I've been self-employed for a few years, and I used to think that, no, I just want the 9-to-5 job. I just want something stable. I just want something sturdy. And then on the side, I'll work on my passion project. Now I really, really know myself and know that there's no fucking way in hell that would ever work for me because I love having so many different things going on at once, and it actually makes me more efficient. So tying this all back up together, I launched my business and I'm starting to expand. I'm starting to really plant those seeds. I'm connecting with people. I'm getting booked for events. I'm, getting invited to be on podcasts. But there was still this part of me that's like, something is missing. So around the time of Mercury in retrograde, which is a time where I think a lot of us really feel the call to go inwards and really, really dig deep, I was really needing to go inwards, and it was a slower season in my business. Granted, still, I just launched in January, so I'm just coming up on my 6-month mark, which is something that I have to continuously remind myself of, like, Rebekah, there's always going to be more to do. There's always going to be more content to put out. There's always more that you can be doing. You've barely even scratched the surface. So just be graceful and give yourself, a little clap for all that you've done and all that you've accomplished, because there's so much more to create and there's so much more to do. But I had this deep call to go inwards, and I was on this walk on Ladybird Lake, which is where I get some of my most intense, like, deep channeled revelations, and I got just the strongest message of it's time to launch this podcast. Like, it doesn't matter that you haven't hit this amount of money, or you don't have X number of clients. Like, this is the time. Like, this is a part of your gifts, part of your skill set. People need to hear your voice. People need to hear what you have to share with the world. So I got this channeled message, and it came through very, very clearly. And then I got the name for the podcast, which is The Joyride, and I was like, this is it. It is now time to launch this podcast. So that was maybe, 1.5, 2 months ago. And ever since I've had that download, it's interesting because so many other aspects of who I am and sharing my gifts have opened up to me. I have now really started to dabble with the idea of I can be a paid speaker and I can be paid to speak and teach about human design and who I am and what I love, and, learning and really coming to terms with the idea of building and connecting with people through collaborations, through partnerships. Like, there are just so many things in the works now. And during those first 3 months of my business, really all of my energy was spent on building this coaching business, which is great. But I am here to tell you, and this is what this podcast is here for, to show and to tell you that you make the rules. Like, there's no rule book. There's no one book for you to follow that says you need to do X, Y, and Z in this pattern. This is the route that you need to go. Nothing like that exists for a reason. We are all here to truly be living our own truth, to be paving our own path, to be living in our authentic truth. I don't know what else to say. Like, I just feel that so strongly inside, and it's the message that if you don't get anything else from this podcast, I would pray, hope, and wish that you walk away from each episode just coming home to yourself a little bit more, just digging a little bit deeper, just like walking away with one revelation, one connection that only you feel inside that allows you to walk more freely in your truth. So yeah, that's all that I really have to share within this first episode. I just wanted to share a little bit about me, the reasoning as to why I created this space and what's to come. So with all that being said, if you have listened to this first episode, thank you so much for being here, and I want to welcome you on this beautiful joyride, which is the Joyride podcast. Stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks, guys.